Kuhn Review, print speaking to the blind, celebrating 40 years of audio newspaper production. Welcome to this week's edition of the National Podcast, recorded at the Bishopbriggs Media Centre by our amazing volunteers. You can get in touch with us via Facebook, Twitter or Instagram using @KuhnReview, that is @CuandReview. You can also contact us directly by emailing information@kuhnreview.com. That is INFORMATION@CuandReview.com, or by calling 0141 772 3976. That's 0141 772 3976.
From the National, Friday the 13th of June 2025, from the news section. MV Caledonian Isles ferry delayed due to last-minute issue. Article written by Lucy Jackson. The return of CalMac's MV Caledonian Isles ferry to the Ardrossan to Arran route has been delayed again due to a last-minute issue picked up during sea trials. The ferry has been out of action since January 2024 due to a series of faults found in its annual overhaul. It was initially meant to return to service on Thursday, but this was postponed until Friday due to adverse weather conditions. However, the return of the Cayley Isles has been delayed again due to issues picked up during sea trials. The ferry operator said that while trials have gone well, a gearbox issue relating to pressure levels still needs to be resolved. Once the issue is fixed, the vessel will need to undergo sea trials again before it can return to service. The MV Caledonian Isles will not be back in service before Tuesday, June 17th at the earliest. CalMac said it would provide an update on June 16th. In the meantime, the MV Glen Sannox and MV Alfred will continue to provide a two-vessel replacement service from Troon until further notice. A CalMac spokesperson said, "Whilst this will be disappointing news, a two-vessel service from Troon will remain in place for now to ensure Arran has a reliable service with appropriate capacity. We carry out sea trials to identify and address issues, and that is what we've done here. It's been a long road to get to this point with MV Caledonian Isles, and in the context of where we've been, we are still confident we will see her carrying passengers between Ardrossan and Brodick imminently." That article was written by Lucy Jackson and read to you by Elizabeth. From the National, Friday the 13th of June 2025, from the Politics section. Neil Gray under fire over using ministerial car to visit the pub. Article written by Xander Elliots. SNP Health Secretary Neil Gray is facing fresh pressure after it emerged that he used a ministerial car to visit the pub before a football game. Gray has previously faced heavy criticism for having been chauffeured in a ministerial car to attend major Aberdeen Cup matches at Hampden Park. The Health Secretary was gifted VIP seats on 3 occasions to watch the Dons play Hibernian, Rangers and Celtic in the League Cup and the Scottish Cup. The Scottish Government said he was attending the games as a guest of the Scottish Football Association to discuss essential business which related to his ministerial brief. Gray, who is an Aberdeen fan, declared the football trips as official business as they occurred across his time as Wellbeing Economy, Fair Work and Energy Secretary. However, the Daily Mail has now reported that Gray also used a taxpayer-funded car to travel to the Brigadon pub in Aberdeen before heading to the city's Pittodrie Stadium in May 2024. The trip was logged as a visit to a personal address, Aberdeen, despite Gray not having a personal address in the city. A Scottish Government spokesperson said, "This is an administration error. Mr. Gray travelled on government business to a restaurant for a personal engagement before returning to government business." They further said the trip was in line with the rules around government car service GCS use. The Scottish Tories and Scottish Labour said Gray had questions to answer. Scottish Labour Deputy Leader Jackie Baillie said, "The decision to take a taxpayer-funded car to the pub is questionable enough, but the fact it was hidden from the public reeks of a cover-up. Neil Gray must come clean about exactly what happened here and explain why exactly this trip to the pub was legitimate government business." And Scots Tory Deputy Leader Rachel Hamilton said, Gray needs to explain why he and his team originally claimed that his ministerial limo took him to a home address rather than to a restaurant for socialising. Given the scandal the misuse of his government car caused, the Health Secretary ought to have double-checked every journey to make sure that his account was factually correct, so this inaccuracy is hard to fathom. In January, Gray apologised for what he called an inadvertent error in his statements to Parliament about the documentation of meetings at football matches he attended. The SNP minister was accused of potentially misleading the Scottish Parliament by saying that minutes were taken at all the meetings in football stadiums. Following a Freedom of Information request, the Sunday Post newspaper was told by the government there was no note produced of the meeting at the 2023 League Cup final at Hampden Park, where Rangers defeated Aberdeen. In November, Gray said it is illegitimate for ministers to attend sporting events, and he will continue to do so. That article was written by Xander Elliotts and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 13th of June 2025, from the Politics section. Reform UK claim 11,000 Scottish members in challenge to Labour. Article written by Xander Elliotts. Scottish Labour have insisted they have more members north of the border than Reform UK after Nigel Farage's party claimed to have hit 11,000. On Friday, Reform UK said it had hit the hugely significant milestone and challenged other parties to reveal their membership numbers. The SNP had 58,940 members as of December 31, 2024, meaning they are still by far Scotland's largest party. Scottish Labour numbers are not routinely published, but in 2021 the Daily Record reported they had 16,467. Reform UK said that they believed Labour's Scottish membership had dropped and they were now only 1,000-odd people behind. Farage's party called on Scottish Labour and all other parties to publish their membership figures in the interests of transparency. Scottish Labour said they would not give a running update, but a spokesperson confirmed they had more members than the 11,000 claimed by Reform. In April 2023, the Greens said they had 7,646 members, but reported a surge in membership for the following year without giving details. In September 2024, the Scottish Tory leadership election revealed that the party had 6,941 members. At the time, reports said this meant the Alba Party had more members, with their accounts reporting 7,507. That article was written by Xander Elliotts and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 13th of June 2025, from the news section. Scotland's first black professor, Sir Geoff Palmer, dies aged 85. Article written by Xander Elliotts. Scotland's first black professor, Sir Geoff Palmer, has died aged 85. The brewing pioneer and human rights campaigner was a fixture of Scotland's academic scene and was known for his efforts to help Scots address the country's colonial past. First Minister John Swinney and Heriot-Watt University, where he was Chancellor, led the tributes. The university said in a statement, "It is with great sadness that we share the news that our esteemed Chancellor and renowned humanitarian, Professor Emeritus Sir Geoff Palmer OBE, has died. Our thoughts are with his family and friends at this difficult time." SNP leader John Swinney said, "I am very saddened to hear this news. Sir Geoff Palmer was a pioneer and an outstanding intellectual. He had a hugely positive impact on Scotland and will be sorely missed. My sympathy to his family." Transport Secretary Fiona Hislop was among the others to pay tribute. She said, "Sir Geoff Palmer was a hero for Scotland in so many ways. I always loved meeting him and will always remember his infectious enthusiasm and smile. My thoughts are with his family and friends." Palmer was known for being generous with his time and for his permanently affable manner, even during disputes. Professor Richard A. Williams, the Principal and Vice-Chancellor of Heriot-Watt University, said, "Sir Geoff was an inspiration, not just to me, but to colleagues past and present, and countless students around the world. His infectious enthusiasm and passion for education was impossible to ignore, and this university was all the richer for having such a strong association with him over the years. He will be dearly missed, and our thoughts are with his loved ones at this difficult time." Palmer came to the UK from Jamaica in 1955 to join his mother in London. After studying grain science and technology, he became Scotland's first black professor in 1989. Palmer invented the barley abrasion process, which speeds up the malting process by damaging the protective husk of grains. In 1998, Palmer was honoured with the American Society of Brewing Chemists Award of Distinction, considered the Nobel Prize of Brewing. His discovery attracted the funding that established the International Centre for Brewing and Distilling as part of the Heriot-Watt campus. He was knighted in the 2014 New Year Honours for services to human rights, science and charity. He was the 2020 recipient of the Jamaican National Honour, the Order of Distinction, Commander Class, and in 2021 was appointed Chancellor of Heriot-Watt University. That article was written by Xander Elliott and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 13th of June 2025, from the Culture section. Oldie Scottish Gin named Best in the World at Top Awards. Article written by Lucy Garcia. A major supermarket's Scottish gin has been named the world's best at a prestigious award ceremony. Oldie's Cola handcrafted Scottish gin picked up the top prize at the World Gin Awards 2025, with judges naming it the world's best classic gin. The Scottish-made London Dry Gin features a blend of juniper, coriander and citrus, rounded off with a hint of bitterness. Judges praised it as both elegant and beautifully balanced, following a rigorous blind tasting of hundreds of entries from more than 20 countries, including the USA, Germany and China. The prestigious award comes after Cola was also named Best in Country at the World Drink Awards earlier this month. Commenting, Graham Nicholson, Group Buying Director at Oldie Scotland, said, "We have had an incredible response for Cola, both from our loyal customers and the wider drinks industry. To be named the best classic gin in the world is the ultimate honour. Scotland may be small, but we consistently punch above our weight on the world food and drink stage. To be able to compete at such a high standard and to win is testament to the craftsmanship and skill of our homegrown suppliers and to the strength of the long-standing partnerships we have formed with them." Oldie's Cola handcrafted Scottish gin retails at $19.99 for a 70cl bottle and is available in all Oldie stores in Scotland. That article was written by Lucy Garcia and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Friday the 13th of June 2025, from the news section. Scottish Borders wind farm plan to push out recovering golden eagles. Article written by Paul Kelly, local democracy reporter. A pioneering project, which is helping golden eagle numbers soar again in the Scottish Borders, is under threat from a proposed wind farm development, conservationists have claimed. The charity Restoring Upland Nature, RUN, formerly known as the South of Scotland Golden Eagle Project, has raised concerns that proposals for the 8-turbine Scordlaw wind farm in the Morphett Hills present a high risk of habitat loss and collision, which could detrimentally impact on the still fragile golden eagle population in the area. The Morphett Hills are home to 4 distinct eagle territories, including one of the first settled breeding pairs in the project's history. Though once abundant in southern skies, by early 2018, the golden eagle population had decreased to between 2 and 4 pairs across Dumfries and Galloway and the Scottish Borders. Now, thanks to the efforts of the RUN's project team and support from a wide range of partners, the golden eagle population in the south of Scotland has more than tripled to the highest number recorded in the area for 3 centuries. Dr. Kat Barlow, Chief Executive at RUN, said, "The Additional Information Report, AIR, currently being used by the site's developers is dated and substantially underestimates the impact on golden eagles at a particularly critical time for the local population. Breeding territories must remain undisturbed for long-term population sustainability, as golden eagles are highly sensitive to disturbance and tend to avoid areas around wind turbines. The expansion of wind farms without rigorous up-to-date environmental data risks pushing these birds out of the very landscapes they need to survive. The southern uplands are now under immense pressure from development, which reinforces the urgent need for an up-to-date cumulative impact assessment study for the region, looking at existing and proposed wind farm, forestry and other developments to mitigate risks and ensure golden eagles continue to thrive in southern skies. Though we believe sustainable energy is key to addressing the climate crisis and protecting our natural world in the long term, after comparing proposals with the insights provided by our state-of-the-art monitoring equipment and detailed field observations by our highly experienced staff, we do not believe Scordlaw in the Moorfoot Hills is the right place for a wind farm development. Fred Olsen Renewables Limited has submitted proposals to the Scottish Government seeking permission to develop Scordlaw Wind Farm on the Holylee Estate, approximately 4 kilometres north of Walkerburn. The company has said the wind farm, which it has reduced in scale, could contribute £8 million to the local economy over its operational lifetime. Addressing the issues around potential impact on the local bird population, a company report stated, "As a result of scoping process, the potential effects of the Scordlaw wind farm on the black grouse, goshawk, golden plover, curlew and snipe will be assessed in the environmental impact assessment. The assessments carried out to date conclude there will be no significant effect on any of the ornithological features. Still, embedded mitigation measures will be applied prior and during construction to ensure compliance with the Wildlife Countryside Act 1981, as amended, and to follow good practice guidance and consultation recommendations with regard to breeding birds." That article was written by Paul Kelly and read to you by Elizabeth.
From the National, Monday the 16th of June 2025, from the news section. Exclusive. UK must not look away from Gaza genocide amid Iran-Israel war. Amnesty. By Laura Pollock. The UK government must not be distracted by Israel's attacks in Iran and take action to stop the ongoing genocide in Gaza, Amnesty International has said. As strikes between Israel and Iran continued for a third day after being sparked by Israel's surprise attack on Friday, Palestinians said Israeli forces opened fire at around dawn towards crowds of people heading to 2 aid sites in Rafah, killing 8 and injuring dozens. Israel's blockade and military campaign have caused widespread hunger and raised the risk of famine in the country. Now, Israel is reportedly set to pursue the military campaign for weeks, not days, according to multiple Israeli and US sources. Satya Deshmukh, the chief executive of Amnesty International UK, said it was crucial that Sir Keir Starmer's government do not get distracted by the escalating tensions from the reality in Gaza. Deshmukh said, "It is crucial that Israel's attacks in Iran do not distract the UK government from action it must take to stop Israel's ongoing genocide against Palestinians in the occupied Gaza Strip, rampant state-backed settler attacks in the West Bank, and Israel's cruel system of apartheid. These violations demand that states, including the UK, forced immediately on the urgent need for a sustained ceasefire in Gaza, and fast-track their diplomatic efforts to help end Israel's decades-long illegal occupation. Israeli officials have claimed the country's initial strikes were an act of self-defence, and argued Iran had rejected diplomatic efforts to ease tensions. Israel said the barrage was necessary before Iran got any closer to building a nuclear weapon, although experts and the UK government have assessed that Tehran was not actively working on such a weapon. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said on Sunday that if the Israeli strikes on Iran stop, then our responses will also stop. First Minister John Swinney also urged the UK government to de-escalate the dangerous situation. Swinney said, "The situation in Gaza and the wider Middle East is deeply concerning. The international community, including the UK government, must do all it can to de-escalate this dangerous situation. Further escalation will result in even greater devastation and instability across the region. It's of paramount importance to all." Scottish Greens co-leader Patrick Harvie said that Israel's attacks were a clear attempt to escalate the conflict and provoke a much wider war in the region. He accused the Israeli government of flooding the media with images of their own choosing while blocking media access to Gaza to prevent the world from seeing the atrocities they are committing. Even a former Israeli Prime Minister has called Netanyahu's government a gang of thugs, and every day they find new ways to prove him right, Harvey said. The UK should immediately withdraw all support for this violent rogue state and work with other countries to have them held accountable for their war crimes. Harvey added, "The Scottish Greens have long called for a lasting ceasefire and an end to the UK's active participation in the ongoing genocide of Gaza. Keir Starmer must end the UK's involvement in conflict rising between the State of Israel and other nations." The comments come as Rachel Reeves indicated that the UK could potentially support Israel amid the escalating conflict, and Keir Starmer confirmed the UK would send jets to the Middle East. Israel's declaration of war on Iran is intended to bring war to the entire Middle East, National Convener of Stop the War Coalition Lindsey Graham told The National. Netanyahu is already bombing 5 countries, and we can only assume those conflicts will escalate. None of this would be possible without the support of the British and US governments. We've been demanding for months that if the UK stops arming Israel, stops the genocide, stops using the Akrotiri RAF base to attack Gaza. Now Starmer's sending jets to the region, clearly prepared to support and enable further war crimes without so much as putting it to a vote in Parliament. It is absolutely abhorrent and removes any prospect of the de-escalation he so weakly called for. Starmer and the President of the UAE had a conversation discussing the conflict between Israel and Iran, according to Downing Street. The Prime Minister called His Highness Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan while in Ottawa on Sunday afternoon. Issuing a readout of the conversation, a Number 10 spokesperson said, "They discussed the grave situation in the Middle East. The Prime Minister reiterated that his priority is diplomacy and dialogue in order to de-escalate as quickly as possible. The Prime Minister said this will be on top of the agenda during his conversations with G7 partners in the next 2 days. They also discussed Gaza and the need to bring an end to the devastation there. They agreed to stay in close touch." That was a piece written by Laura Pollock and read by E. McKenna. From The National, Monday the 16th of June 2025, from the news section. UK will potentially support Israel in Iran conflict, says Rachel Reeves. Article written by Laura Pollock. Rachel Reeves has indicated that the UK could potentially support Israel amid the conflict in the Middle East. It comes after Keir Starmer confirmed that the UK would send jets to the Middle East following the attacks sparked by Israel. Israel has unleashed airstrikes across Iran for a third day and threatened even greater force as some Iranian missiles evaded Israeli air defences to strike buildings in the heart of the country. Planned talks in Iran's nuclear programme, which could provide an off-ramp for the conflict, were called off. The region braced for a protracted conflict after Israel's surprise bombardment of Iran's nuclear and military sites on Friday killed several top generals and nuclear scientists. Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said on Sunday that if the Israeli strikes on Iran stop, then our responses will also stop. Reeves told Sky News that she was not going to rule anything out at this stage, given the fast-moving situation. Asked whether the UK would come to Israel's aid if asked, the Chancellor told Sunday Morning with Trevor Phillips, "We have, in the past, supported Israel when there have been missiles coming in. I'm not going to comment on what might happen in the future, but so far, we haven't been involved, and we're sending in assets to both protect ourselves and also potentially to support our allies." Pushed again on whether the UK would deploy assets in support of Israel if asked, she said, "What we've done in the past is help protect Israel from incoming strikes, so a defensive activity." She added, "I'm not going to rule anything out at this stage. It's a fast-moving situation, a very volatile situation. But we don't want to see escalation, we want to see de-escalation." Iran said Israel stuck to oil refineries, raising the prospect of a broader assault on Iran's heavily sanctioned energy industry that could affect global markets. The Israeli military, in a social media post, warns Iranians to evacuate arms factories, signalling what could be a further widening of the campaign. US President Donald Trump has expressed full support for Israel's actions, while warning Iran could only avoid further destruction by agreeing to a new nuclear deal. New explosions echoed across Tehran and were reported elsewhere in the country early on Sunday, but there was no update to a death toll put out on the day before by Iran's UN ambassador, who said 78 people had been killed and more than 320 wounded. In Israel, at least 10 people were killed in Iranian strikes overnight and into Sunday, according to Israel's Magen David Adom Rescue Service, bringing the country's total death toll to 13. That article was written by Laura Pollock and read by Ian McKenna. From the National, Monday the 16th of June 2025, from the comment section. John Swinney is a decent, caring kind of chap. Inspirational, he's not. By columnist Ruth Wishart. Like most other political anoraks, I've always found John Swinney to be a decent, caring kind of chap. Inspirational he's not, however. If a cause needs a charismatic figure to sweep serious numbers to the metaphorical barricades, Honest John is not that man. This is not just about the Hamilton by-election saga, embarrassing as that undoubtedly was, or about the misguided tactics which showcase Reform UK and have possibly helped their vote along. In days of yore, the London media used to write that John Smith was like a douche Scottish bank manager. He wasn't. As one of his close pals observes, he could and did start a party in an empty room. But that might be an entirely suitable description of the chap now leading his troops into something not at all resembling a glad, confident morning. Sunlit uplands are not in view. Swinney's outings in Holyrood are invariably courteous and low-key, rather like his private persona. He says, not unfairly, that after a period of unparalleled turbulence, it was down to him to impose a period of steady as she goes in order to portray the Scottish ship of state in a more creditable light. He answered his party's call in time of their need, not without personal family sacrifice, and he's due gratitude for that. And it's assuredly not his fault that his party suffers from the same fate which, inevitably, befalls all administrations which somehow survive their natural sell-by date. Even the apparently impregnable Lady Thatcher had to be elbowed out the door when her trusty lieutenants lined up to say, "Time's up, ducks." Those who continue to laud her extended period in office seem to suffer from false memory syndrome. Many in her party continue to worship her at her posthumous shrine. In Scotland, however, she was as welcome as the average pandemic. One of the things which has kept the SNP in power these many years has been the lack of a credible alternative. However desperate Anna Sarwar may be to usher his family over the door of Bute House, it's still not easy to see where his other big hitters will come from outside of his ever-articulate deputy, Jackie Baillie, who has long, and perhaps wisely, eschewed the top job. The Tories, who barely hung on to the deposit at the last time of asking, are hardly destined to mount any kind of takeover. They're much more likely to be summoning a cab from the rank to house their diminishing troops. Never has a flush been more evidently busted. Alba have yet to make any kind of impact at the ballot box, a fate hardly helped by the loss of their leader whose ebullient instincts provided much of their initial excitement. Their solitary MSP has yet to sail under her own colours, though I suspect she might sink without very much trace when she does. Like all new political parties, Alba have already encountered the internal warfare, and I rather doubt Kenny McCaskill would have offered his leadership services had he faced a different opponent. There is a school of thought that the dawn of Alba helped the SNP by attracting a wheen of their most vocal critics. It's not a theory to which I subscribe, though, it has to be said, many of them were in front of the queue when spiteful comments were handed out. I also remain convinced that the independence field has become altogether too cluttered to encourage any kind of coherent strategic vision. That same hymn sheet from which all indie supporters are supposed to sing has become more than a little frayed around the edges. However, if Swinney reneges on his pledge to serve another full 5 years if elected next year, the obvious question is, who should inherit a chalice which is more than slightly poisoned by recent and historic events? Changing a leader without changing tactics is not of itself particularly useful. They tried that once before without much success, you may recall, while Swinney is in charge for the second time. The first not exactly an unbridled triumph, nor his stinted education. Right now there is an obvious need not just to close the gap between those who favour independence and those who are at least nominally SNP supporters, and the requirement to persuade doubters that independence is overwhelmingly in our national interest. These are not easy tricks to pull off, and they will need both a considerable political skill set and an ability to persuade erstwhile adherents that you are serious about independence, the very foundation of the party. It will also require an appetite for compromise among those who cannot immediately finger a flaw-free candidate, but have an overriding need to see a proper and properly urgent campaign take flight. One which can encapsulate the core message of why independence matters so much. The queue of contenders is not a lengthy one, it must be conceded. Stephen Flynn may well have the gift of the gab, but is yet to win a seat at Holyrood. Kate Forbes, who came a close second in the last contest, suffered badly because of her beliefs. I have little time for those in her party who clutched their pearls very publicly at the thought of her religious views, despite being very well aware of them during her ministerial years. Personally, I am much more hostile about her enthusiasm for free ports. There was much merriment in the comment section of the column which proposed Mary McCallan as an obvious candidate, not just because of her relative inexperience, but because she was considered too wedded to the internal forces of top-down control. There are not a few folks around to remember when the SNP conference decisions by the actual membership were regarded as tablets of stone. Stephen Gethins is another name which floats into the frame. He too has yet to get his feet under a Holyrood desk, and is something of a clone of the effortlessly polite incumbent. Bright guy though. The unpalatable truth is that none of us know how anyone will perform in the heat of battle. There are those who grow into leadership roles and those whose weaknesses are exposed by them. Think Boris Johnson. Think Liz Truss. How the latter, with her monotonous delivery ever enchanted the Tory faithful, is one of life's enduring mysteries. Johnson, meanwhile, with his loose relationship to the truth, thoroughly deserves his mini Donald Trump moniker. What is crystal clear, though, is that the status quo neither excites the faithful nor persuades the naysayers. It is said that Joe Biden left it too late to give Kamala Harris a fighting chance of winning. Some will argue that with less than a year to the 2026 poll, Scotland too can't afford to change horses in midstream. Yet what other route is there to persuading Scottish voters that a fresh face with, importantly a fresh team, can deliver what improvements are possible without losing the Westminster straitjacket? There is little doubt in my mind that nothing less than a root and branch reform of a tiring party will let it recover enough of its mojo to enthuse those desperate to feel that there is a clear direction of travel being outlined. Sure, time is short. All the more reason to use it wisely and not be afraid to redraw the map radically. Everything about a Reform UK is risible, from them being a policy-free zone to their total lack of anything resembling a Scottish sensibility. At its helm is a man who has been in more parties than Boris. His USP is to create an air of wholly undeserved excitement around him. We certainly don't need a Nigel Farage. Have him for friend, but we could use some excitement. That was a comment piece written by Ruth Wishart. From the National, Monday the 16th of June 2025, from the comment section. Our island community borrowed £8.3 million for a wind farm. Here is how it went. By Alice Mathewson. Next month is a milestone for North Yale. On July 14, the first house purchased by the local development trust will be let, and its new tenant will move in. It's an important moment because, like so many areas in rural Scotland, this is a place where there's nowhere for workers to live, and there's nowhere for young people to go when they leave home. So we're investing in housing. The thing that this allows us to do that is wind. In 2017 we built 5 wind turbines at the Garth Wind Farm, which together generated around 4.5 megawatts of electricity that goes right back into the grid. Every year we negotiate with suppliers to get the best price for electricity. We produce, and after we have covered costs, we invest the rest right back into the community. The amount of power we generate is the equivalent to just one of the turbines at the Viking wind farm on mainland Shetland, which has 103 turbines and is run by Viking and SSE Renewables. But the amount of difference we've made in terms of community benefit and investment here is incomparable. If we hadn't had an active and determined volunteer community on Yell, this would never have happened. They borrowed £8.3 million to build it. That was a huge risk for the community to take, but it's paid off big time. We need to take in around £1 million to cover our costs, and anything on top of that we invest back into the community. At the moment we are investing in housing, and before now we have extended our industrial estate, built a big marina, purchased a local shop and bought 2 business units which we are turning into a community hub. In addition, we operate a number of social projects, including a free community lunch club which is attended by 60 to 70 people weekly, a local youth club, and shopping and prescription deliveries. We have also just purchased a vehicle for community use and operate a community grant scheme distributing funds to other organisations and individuals. We now have what we've been told is the largest community-owned industrial estate in Europe, and it's occupied by local businesses over 14 sites. We have a 28-berth marina, with 23 permanently let berths and 5 for visiting vessels. This services business and recreation users, as well as the tourist industry that's built up in Cullyvoe, and we are going to build a caravan park. Unlike some other wind farm developments, there was never any objection to Garth, and that's because all profits are going back into the community. Now there are a number of potential projects trying to replicate what we have done, but they can't get a look in because there's no space for them to connect to the local grid. We can't expand either for the same reason. Our story was told in a report released by Platform last week on the social value of renewables in the Highlands and Islands. There are other projects like Tyree's Community Wind Turbine, which returns over 100 times more economic value to the community than the privately owned Ben Anturic 1-2 wind farm, despite being around 1% of the size. Projects like ours should be at the top of the list. We have shown what can be done with a fraction of the power that Viking produces. If big developers left a small amount of grid connection aside for others to do what we have done, the benefits would be massive. Where big wind farms are being developed, the community should receive a percentage of their gross income in the same way as they pay the landowners. Community benefit should not be calculated based on a £1 per installed megawatt basis. This is not fair, and current Scottish Government guidance relating to this should be both revised and enshrined in legislation. Communities should also have a right to buy a share in the renewables project should they wish to do so. And, crucially, there should be access to the grid for people like us who want to make the most of the clean power that Scotland has to offer. We know how much money can be made, and if communities really want to benefit from renewables, they need a real and lasting stake. That article was written by Alice Mathewson and read by me, Ian McKenna.
From The National, Tuesday the 17th of June 2025, from the news section. EasyJet announces direct flights between Aberdeen Airport and Paris. Article written by Alistair Ferguson. EasyJet has announced Scottish holidaymakers will be able to get a direct flight from Aberdeen to Paris later this year. The popular low-cost airline will introduce the route from Aberdeen International Airport to Charles de Gaulle at the end of October. Tickets are already available to book via the EasyJet website, with the first flight to leave at 1:15 p.m. on Monday, October 27th. Outward and return flights will operate every Monday and Friday until the first week of January 2026. Journeys will resume on February 2nd and can be booked until Friday, March 20th. Flights between the Granite City and the City of Love have not been available since the COVID pandemic. Council leaders have since urged Air France to reintroduce direct flights in a bid to boost tourism in the northeast. EasyJet will now offer northeast holidaymakers the opportunity to travel directly to Paris in just a few hours. From Charles de Gaulle, Paris's city centre is only half an hour away, while a high-speed train to Disneyland only takes 10 minutes. Ticket prices for the flights vary, with the cheapest one-way option starting at £30.99 and the most expensive being £85.99. The news comes after EasyJet unveiled in April more than 8,000 trips across its Scottish network, including 107 destinations in Europe, North Africa and the Middle East, had gone on sale. And that article was written by Alistair Ferguson. From The National, Tuesday the 17th of June 2025, from the news section. Man admits dismembering Phoenix Spencer Horn, 21, in East Kilbride. Article written by Laura Pollock. The partner of 21-year-old Phoenix Spencer Horn has been found guilty of her murder in East Kilbride after texting her mother that she was alive and well. Ewan Medvin, 27, pleaded guilty at the High Court in Glasgow on Tuesday to murder and attempting to defeat the ends of justice. Around 12:10 p.m. on Monday, November 18th, 2024, the body of Phoenix was found within a flat on Glen Lee. Prosecutors told the court that Medvin choked Spencer Horn before severing her head and trying to remove her limbs and torso from her body. Medvin then tried to cover up his actions for 2 days by sending texts to Spencer Horn's mother, Alison Spencer, saying that her daughter was alive and well. Medvin was subsequently arrested and charged in connection with her death. He will be sentenced on Monday, July 14th, 2025. Detective Chief Inspector Susie Cairns said, "My thoughts remain with Phoenix's family and friends as they continue to try to come to terms with what has happened. Medvin now faces the consequences of his actions. Violence such as this is never acceptable in our communities, and we will work tirelessly to ensure those responsible are brought to justice." And that article was written by Laura Pollock. From The National, Tuesday the 17th of June 2025, from the politics section. MSPs consider plans to stop landowners blocking community buyouts. Article written by Lucy Jackson. MSPs are set to consider proposals which would stop neglectful landowners from blocking community buyouts of local land. The Scottish Greens tabled the amendments to the Land Reform Scotland Bill, which would give communities greater powers to take back local land from absentee landowners. Currently, communities are restricted from progressing with community buyouts of neglected land if the landowner brings a small part of the area into use. Scottish Greens MSP Mark Ruskell brought forward the amendments which would mean landlords would have to bring at least 50% of a landholding into use. Otherwise, it would be classed as abandoned or neglected and would be eligible for community buyout. The Land Reform Scotland Bill was tabled by the SNP government and passed its first hurdle in the Scottish Parliament at the Stage 1 debate in March. Part of the legislation aims to increase opportunities for community buyouts of land, and also when large estates are put on the market, ministers could break up this land, in a process known as lotting, into smaller areas if certain conditions are met. However, ministers have already been told by Holyrood's Net Zero Environment and Transport Committee that significant change is needed to the bill if it is to deliver on the Scottish Government's ambitious policy objectives. Ruskell's proposals are set to be debated and voted on at the same committee on Tuesday. Commenting, Ruskell said, "For too long, people have been unfairly barred from bringing local land back into community ownership because of a tiny loophole in the law. It cannot be right that neglectful landowners are able to leave land ignored and derelict for many years, whilst communities are desperate to bring areas back into productive use. The Land Reform Bill should be an opportunity to tackle this kind of inherent unfairness in Scotland's land ownership, and that's exactly why I've brought these proposals forward." Ruskell added that he has been supporting locals in Largo, Fife, where he said that plans for the community buyout of local land have been blocked by the landowner converting less than 10% of the holding into a horticulture business. He said that the rest of the site, which includes historic buildings and gardens, have been left abandoned and neglected. Ruskell added, "For folks in Largo, this ridiculous saga has gone on for too long. It's time to close the Largo loophole for good." And that article was written by Lucy Jackson. From The National, Tuesday the 17th of June 2025, from the news section. Poundland to shut 68 stores after being sold for £1. Article written by Lucy Jackson. Bargain chain Poundland has announced it is shutting 68 stores and 2 warehouses after being sold for £1. Up to 150 stores are potentially set to close as part of the new restructuring plan, subject to approval by the High Court in August. The discount chain, known for primarily selling products for £1, had been put on the market earlier this year after a sharp downturn in trading and has now been bought by investment firm Gordon Brothers for a nominal fee. Sources close to the process have said this was £1. At the moment, it operates around 800 stores and employs around 16,000 people. On Tuesday, Gordon Brothers said its recovery plan intended to deliver a financially sustainable operating model for the business after an extended period of underperformance. As well as seeking rent reductions across a number of locations, Poundland said it anticipated an initial 68 store closures and estimated its total estate would drop from around 800 stores to 650 to 700. The bargain chain also plans to cease online sales and withdraw sales of frozen food from stores where it is currently offered. Poundland's frozen and digital distribution centre at Darton, South Yorkshire, is set to close later this year, and its national distribution centre in Bilston, West Midlands, is expected to shut early next year. Poundland Managing Director Barry Williams said, "It's no secret that we have much work to do to get Poundland back on track. While Poundland remains a strong brand, serving 20 million plus shoppers each year, our performance for a significant period has fallen short of our high standards, and action is needed to enable the business to return to growth. It's sincerely regrettable that this plan includes the closure of stores and distribution centres, but it's necessary if we're to achieve our goal of securing the future of thousands of jobs and hundreds of stores. It goes without saying that if our plans are approved, we will do all we can to support colleagues who will be directly affected by the changes." And that article was written by Lucy Jackson. From The National, Tuesday the 17th of June 2025, from the Politics section. Scottish Government names date for ditching 2-child cap. Article written by Steph Braun. The Scottish Government will abolish the 2-child benefit cap in March next year, just weeks before the Holyrood election. Social Justice Secretary Shirley Ann Somerville has said the cap, which was introduced by the Tories at Westminster, will be lifted on March 2nd. The 2-child limit denies child allowances and universal credit and tax credits to third or subsequent child born after April 2017 and has been kept in place by Keir Starmer's Labour UK government. An associated so-called rape clause grants exemptions for a child born as a result of non-consensual conception, which has remained highly controversial since it was put in place. The Scottish Government pledged to mitigate the policy in its budget. Under the SNP's mitigation plan, payments could work out at nearly $3,500 for children affected. The Scottish Fiscal Commission has estimated the cost of the 2-child limit payment to be £155 million in the financial year 2026 to 2027. Somerville has said the plan will mean there will be 20,000 fewer children in relative poverty next year. She added it would be the fastest a Scottish social security benefit had been delivered. The Scottish Government has consistently called on the UK Government to end the 2-child cap. Somerville said, "Reports suggest that they are looking at the impact it is having. But the evidence is clear and families in Scotland can't wait any longer for the UK Government to make up its mind, to do the right thing and scrap the cap once and for all. The 2-child limit payment will begin accepting applications in March next year. At less than 15 months from when we announced this in the Scottish budget, this will be the fastest that a Scottish social security benefit has been delivered. This builds upon the considerable action we have taken in Scotland, including delivering unparalleled financial support through our Scottish Child Payment, investing to clear school meal debts and continuing to support almost 10,000 children by mitigating the UK Government's benefit cap as fully as possible. Somerville added that the UK government was still holding back Scotland's progress. Modelling published in March makes clear that if the UK government acted decisively on child poverty, they could help to take an estimated 100,000 children out of poverty this year. According to the Scottish Government, rates of both relative and absolute child poverty were 9 percentage points lower than the UK average in 2023 to 2024. On average, households with children in the poorest 10% of households are this year estimated to be £2,600 a year better off because of Scottish Government policies. This is projected to grow to an average of £3,700 a year by 2029 to 2030. In April, analysis showed the cap has dragged 30,000 more children into poverty since Labour took office. The Child Poverty Action Group, CPAG, carried out research which also suggested 350,000 children would be lifted out of poverty instantly at a cost of £2 billion, while the depth of poverty would be reduced for another 800,000. The organisation says 109 more children a day are pulled into poverty by the policy. Due to the fact the two-child limit applies to third or subsequent children born after 2017 April, it is effectively still being rolled out, with more and more children affected every day. The number of children affected by the policy will continue to increase until 2035, when the first children born under the two-child limit turn 18. And that article was written by Steph Braun.
This is from The National on Tuesday the 17th of June 2025, from the comments section. Green leaders abandoned the radicalism they ran on. This article is by Steph Payton. There's no denying that the 2014 independence referendum brought a radical change to Scottish parliamentary politics. Exploding numbers in party membership was a testament to our nation's newly burgeoning relationship with the political status quo. Yes or no, I doubt many left that campaign period with a shining love for the British state, even if we diverged on the best way to fix it. But while no campaigners settled down for the promised package of sweeping constitutional change that was promised and never delivered, many Yes campaigners turned to the political party system. The fight was not over. The SNP, to the detriment of the Yes movement, hoovered up a lot of that talent and has spent the last decade burning through what remained of their energy and the goodwill built on the near miss of independence. But for many like myself, the vehicle to change was not going to be the managerial talk like a leftist, act like a centrist SNP. The party's vision for an independent Scotland was too continuity focused. Same money, same monarchy, same ineffective tax plans. What was independence for, if not to take a different path? Enter the Scottish Green Party. My relationship to parliamentary politics has, let's say, changed somewhat in the intervening decade. But, at the time, and with that frustrated momentum of a job unfinished, the Greens were my home when everyone was getting comfortable for the long fight. They were unapologetic in their support for fair taxation, real land reform, and more. Issues that seem positively nostalgic in this time of being on the back foot to populist far-right rhetoric. Where the SNP were afraid to rock the boat with their messaging on independence, the Greens painted a picture of what a better Scotland could be. And for years now, I've watched as Green leadership trampled and undermined every principle that brought people to the party in the first place. What credibility can a party have for building a better future when its limited time with power was used to wave through government budgets that devastated local communities? And yes, I'm sure some could argue that without Green influence, these cuts would have been deeper, more significant. But If the choice presented is between a kick to the head and a kick to the face, you don't pick the lesser evil. You reject the choice itself. It's not quite the same territory as the Lib Dems backing benefit sanctions to secure a 5p bag tax from the Tories, but the Greens should never have been in a position of passing on those cuts to local communities and services. If that's the price of being in government, I have to wonder why any Green was willing to pay it. In its quest to professionalise, Green leadership has morphed into the very thing that people joined the Greens to avoid. Red lines drawn in shifting sand, consolidated power amongst the high Hegians, and an aversion to the very radicalism that brought relevance in the first place. At a party conference in 2024, a motion amendment from Green activist Ellie Gomersall and Glasgow councillor Anthony Carroll was passed to bind MSPs into voting against any future budget that made further cuts to local councils. This did not come from the leadership, but from activists within the party who had watched their MSPs support cuts in opposition to everything the party stood for. The membership backed the amendment, putting itself at odds with the leadership, and not for the first or last time. Humza Yousaf did the party a favour by prematurely ending the SNP's power-sharing deal with the Greens. The SNP's chaotic search for its post-Sturgeon identity threatened to take the Greens with it, while party leadership refused to let go. The bitter end to the Bute House Agreement was the best outcome for the Greens, and it created a useful distance between the party's leadership and the SNP's centrist failures. But I'm not sure I can say that it was deserved. In the end, it'll be down to the Greens to look at their victories in government like a new national park, cancelled by the SNP, or the creation of more highly protected marine areas, also cancelled by the SNP, or plans to get more homes using green heating systems, cancelled, or the ban on conversion therapy, take a guess, and ask themselves if the cuts they passed on were worth it. Where I criticise, I want to make two extremely clear points. First, my aim is at the party leadership and not the membership who have, frankly, been steamrollered these past few years. And second, even with these criticisms, it doesn't diminish my respect ultimately for the graft put in to bring the Greens to where they are today, for better and worse. Many in positions of power in the party have stuck with the Greens through dire times and have put endless sweat and tears into providing an alternative to the mainstream political machine, which only makes these last years all the more sour. I do think it's time for a change in the Scottish Green Party, not only for the reasons I've listed, but also more pragmatically, from the fact that an ostensibly radical alternative to the status quo has failed to make real hay out of the rise of Reform UK. When people are crying out for anti-establishment politicians and Green polling isn't shifting, there are questions to be asked. MSP candidate selections have begun in the Greens, and it seems to be shaping up to be a fight between the old guard and more radical voices within the party. Cards on the table, some of those challengers are good friends of mine, but I don't support them for that reason. They represent the change I want to see in the Greens, and the change we need to see in politics, full stop. What use is another establishment party when the possibility of real change is right in front of us? And that article was written by Steph Payton and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from the National on Tuesday the 17th of June 2025 from the comments section. Statistics mask the reality of school exclusion rates. This article is by Shona Craven. When is a school exclusion not a school exclusion? When it's off the books and the pupil disappears almost entirely from education, but still counts as included for the purpose of official statistics. The organisation Who Cares Scotland has this week raised the alarm about the widespread informal exclusion of care-experienced children, suggesting the practice is masking schools' failure to uphold policies that were put in place in 2020. The pledge that Scotland must not exclude care-experienced children from education or reduce their timetable to such an extent that they are denied their rights to education formed part of The Promise, which was drawn up following an extensive independent care review that asked care-experienced people and their families about the care system they had been forced to negotiate and learn what they wished had been different. School was identified as of particular importance to children whose home lives were unsettled, with school exclusion being a key area of concern. When the Scottish Government published its report on education outcomes for looked after children last August, the picture was gloomy. The rate of exclusions for looked after pupils had risen from 78 cases per 1,000 pupils in 2021-22 to 97 cases per 1,000 pupils in 2022-23. This exclusion rate was almost 6 times that of the general pupil population, and while the gap between these rates was smaller than a decade earlier, it had widened over the previous 12 months. These figures were already cause for concern, but Who Cares Scotland believes the true picture is worse. Attendance rates for looked after children had dropped from 88% to 84%, and its report says its advocacy workers are reporting a sharp increase in informal exclusions and a change in language around exclusions to circumvent new exclusion policies stemming from The Promise. Examples of this included exclusions often recorded as authorised absences or drastic part-time timetables offering as little as 30 minutes of education a week. One worker stated that this amounted to exclusion labelled as support. Another described this practice as improving the school's statistics at the detriment of the needs of the child. The child referred to here is, of course, the one on the drastically reduced timetable. But this comment obscures the reality that no head teacher wants to be excluding pupils, officially or otherwise, and such decisions must take into account the needs of the entire school community. Who Cares Scotland quite rightly advocates for the best interests of care-experienced pupils, who so often have decisions made for them by others, whether relatives, teachers, social workers, or children's panel members, and can feel like they have almost no control over their own lives. This disempowerment comes through in many of the testimonials included in the report, such as when a child says, "I'm struggling quite badly in some subjects, but nothing is being done about it. I've spoken to my guidance teacher about it, but they're busy and I don't know what they could do about it." Focus groups run by the charity found that many young people felt they had been branded a problem child or a bad pupil, and as a consequence would be unfairly blamed for things they did not do, or subjected to what they perceived as a harsher interpretation of school rules. There's little in the report about specific reasons for exclusions, although one quote from an advocacy worker provides hints, referring to behaviour and incidents, and the school saying, "The aim is for the pupil to be back at school when they feel everyone will be safe." Schools must acknowledge that care-experienced pupils are at a disadvantage, and they have an obligation to provide the necessary support to allow them to be educated and achieve their full potential. By law, looked after children must be considered to have additional support needs unless the local authority is able to demonstrate otherwise. Who Cares Scotland wants to see all local authorities adopt a whole school approach that involves staff training, drop-ins for care-experienced pupils, and lesson inputs that challenge the stigma looked after children can face. It also wants to see greater use of virtual head teachers and online schools to keep these pupils engaged with learning. These are not unreasonable asks, especially when the cost of young people disengaging from education are so high and potentially devastating. However, it must also be acknowledged that schools and their staff cannot solve all of society's problems. Yes, more can always be done, whether to provide support in school or virtually, or to tackle prejudice in the classroom and the wider community. But can exclusions ever be avoided altogether? And is the promise likely to be met if schools are finding ways to obscure the reality of the decisions they are taking to keep everyone safe? And that article was written by Shona Craven and read by Lynn McNeil. This is from The National on Tuesday, the 17th of June 2025, from the Culture section. EasyJet announces direct flights between Aberdeen Airport and Paris. This article is by Alistair Ferguson. EasyJet has announced Scottish holidaymakers will be able to get a direct flight from Aberdeen to Paris later this year. The popular low-cost airline will introduce the route from Aberdeen International Airport to Charles de Gaulle at the end of October. Tickets are already available to book via the EasyJet website, with the first flight to leave at 1:15 p.m. on Monday, October the 27th. Outward and return flights will operate every Monday and Friday until the first week of January 2026. Journeys will resume on February 2nd and can be booked until Friday, March 20th. Flights between the Granite City and City of Love have not been available since the COVID pandemic. Council leaders have since urged Air France to reintroduce direct flights in a bid to boost tourism in the North East. EasyJet will now offer North East holidaymakers the opportunity to travel directly to Paris in just a few hours. From Charles de Gaulle, Paris's city centre is only half an hour away, while a high-speed train to Disneyland only takes 10 minutes. Ticket prices for the flights vary, with the cheapest one-way option starting at £30.99 and the most expensive being £85.99. The news comes after EasyJet unveiled in April more than 8,000 trips across its Scottish network, including 107 destinations in Europe, North Africa and the Middle East had gone on sale. And that article was written by Alistair Ferguson and read by Lynn McNeil.
From The National, Wednesday the 18th of June 2025, from the Politics section. MSPs pass bill giving Gaelic and Scots official status in Scotland. Article written by Gregor Young. MSPs have passed a bill which gives the Gaelic and Scots languages official status in Scotland. The Scottish Parliament voted unanimously in favour of the Scottish Languages Bill, which also makes changes to the support of Gaelic and Scots education, on Tuesday. Ministers say they are confident the bill will accelerate the growth of both languages, but Labour says it will do nowhere near enough. Provisions included in the bill involve the establishment of areas of linguistic significance in Gaelic communities, allowing ministers to focus grant funding in areas where the language is most fragile. Ahead of the Stage 3 debate, Deputy First Minister Kate Forbes said, I am confident that this bill will accelerate the growth of Gaelic and Scots by establishing both languages as official. She said it would also strengthen the rights of parents to ask for a Gaelic school to be established in their area, as well as introduce targets for people speaking Gaelic and qualifications in the language. Forbes said, "To support the growth of Scotland's Indigenous languages, we are also providing an additional £5.7 million to promote Scots and Gaelic this year." Labour's finance spokesperson Michael Marra said, "This bill does nowhere near enough to protect the Gaelic language. Scottish Labour amendments will strengthen the legislation, but still the best that can be said is that this bill will do no harm. Without economic developments in the heartlands, we know that the prospects for Scotland's ancient languages are bleak. In the face of a Gaelic crisis, the SNP chose to bring a bill of limited scope that will at best make modest improvements." That article was written by Gregor Young and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Wednesday the 18th of June 2025, from the news section. Orkney Council ends investigation into leaving UK. Article written by Alistair Ferguson. Orkney Islands Council has ended its investigation into leaving the UK after spending 2 years exploring opportunities for greater autonomy. In July 2023, the local authority passed a motion that looked into various models for alternative governance, after the former council leader said Orkney does not get fair funding with its current relationship within the UK. Council officials explored changes which included changing Orkney's status in the UK or even potentially becoming a self-governing territory of Norway. However, a report to councillors concluded that the proposals were too difficult and too expensive, and members agreed to investigate a single authority model to reform how public services are delivered instead. The local authority is now mapping out a new direction with the Scottish Government to reform how local services may be delivered in future, with preliminary talks having already been held. Orkney's current council leader, Heather Woodbridge, assured members during their meeting that this was just the start of a more detailed appraisal and implementing the model was not a foregone conclusion. Orkney's bid to cut ties with the UK made headlines 2 years ago after former council leader, James Stocken, said he wanted to explore a future for the area to be similar to Crown dependencies like the Channel Islands and overseas territories like the Falkland Islands. At the time, Stocken said many areas in Orkney were being failed dreadfully by both the UK and Scottish governments, and that the islands have a huge affinity and a deep cultural relationship with Norway, after previously being part of the Norse Kingdom. Orkney was gifted to Scotland, along with Shetland, by King Christian I of Denmark in Norway in 1472 as security for a wedding dowry. The debt was never repaid, and the islands have remained part of Scotland ever since then. Stocken's motion was backed by his fellow councillors in 2023, who voted by 15 votes to 6 in favour of exploring alternative models of governance. Stocken left his leadership role and stood down from the council in January last year. That article was written by Alistair Ferguson and read to you by Elizabeth. From The National, Wednesday the 18th of June 2025, from the news section. Peter Oborne calls out BBC double standards over Gaza coverage. Article written by Alistair Ferguson. A British journalist has called out a BBC director over the broadcaster's double standards of reporting on Palestinians during Israel's war on Gaza. Peter Oborne, former chief political commentator of the Daily Telegraph, questioned the BBC's Director of News Content, Richard Burgess, during the launch of the Centre for Media Monitoring's, CFMM, report on the BBC's coverage of Israel's war on Gaza. The 188-page document analysed the broadcaster's coverage between October 7, 2023 and October 6, 2024, and found a pattern of bias, double standards and silencing of Palestinian voices by the BBC. Despite there being 34 times more Palestinian deaths, the CFMM found this was not reflected in the number of victim profiles the BBC ran for Palestinians, 279, and Israelis, 201. Findings also showed that the BBC interviewed twice as many Israelis as Palestinians when reporting on Gaza, And despite Israel being credibly accused of committing genocide in Gaza, the CFMM said BBC presenters interrupted or dismissed genocide claims more than 100 times, yet made no mention of genocidal rhetoric used by Israeli leaders. You never educated your audience about the genocidal remarks, and according to this report, on 100 occasions, you've closed down the references to genocide by your guests, Oborne said to Burgess. This makes you complicit, he said. Oborne argued that it is a grotesque omission by the BBC to only mention the Dahiyya Doctrine, an Israeli military strategy involving the large-scale destruction of civilian infrastructure, in passing once. He added that people cannot understand what has been going on in Gaza in the last 2 years without the historical context of the Dahiyya Doctrine. The report also showed that when compared with the BBC's coverage of the war in Ukraine, the BBC mentioned Russian war crimes 2.6 times more than Israeli ones, and used sympathetic language for Ukrainian victims 2 times more than for Palestinians. Oborne added, "I can't believe what I'm going to say. This figure of 6%, 170-something journalists murdered by Israel. The BBC's only bothered to report 6% of them, whereas you duly reported 60% of Ukrainian journalists." During the report's launch on Tuesday, the CFMM, which is a project by the Muslim Council of Britain, called for an independent public review of the BBC's reporting on Gaza. The CFMM said, "This report is evidence-based, rigorous and damning. The BBC must reform." Commentating on the report, Hussam Zomlot, Palestinian ambassador to the UK, said, "In spite of the genocidal rhetoric of the Israeli leadership, the media persisted in projecting an inaccurate equivalence, distorting realities on the ground." Following the report's publication, a BBC spokesperson said, "We welcome scrutiny and reflect on all feedback. Throughout our impartial reporting on the conflict, we have made clear the devastating human cost of civilians living in Gaza. We will continue to give careful thought to how we do this. We believe it is imperative that our journalists have access to Gaza, and we continue to call on the Israeli government to grant this. We agree that language is vitally important, but we have some questions about what appears to be reliance on AI to analyse it in this report, and we do not think due impartiality can be measured by counting words. We make our own independent editorial decisions, and we reject any suggestion otherwise. However, we will consider the report carefully and study its findings in detail." That article was written by Alistair Ferguson and read to you by Elizabeth.
This is from The National on Thursday, 19th June 2025. From the Culture section. Charlene Spiteri emotional over honorary doctorate. By Ryan McDougall, PA News Agency. Charlene Spiteri has said she would have been happy if her band had written just one hit record when she started out, as she was awarded an honorary doctorate for her services to music. The singer, who formed Scots rock group Texas in 1986 with her bandmates, said she never anticipated achieving global success as she sat recording debut single I Don't Want a Lover, which kick-started the group's path to fame. On Wednesday, the University of Glasgow recognised a number of individuals for services to their respective fields and industries, including Spiteri, broadcaster Kirsty Young, political scientist Professor Sir John Curtis, and the author and journalist Sally Magnuson. Following the special Commemoration Day ceremony, which marked the foundation of the university, Spiteri, originally from Bellshill, North Lanarkshire, said it was emotional to have received such recognition for her career in music, and said she and her sister wished their mother could have been there to witness the occasion. She told the PA News Agency, When I got the call, the first thing I did was phone my sister Corinne up and said, "You will never believe this." And both of us were wishing my mum could have been there to see it, which makes it really special. In the moment, you're sitting in there and you're surrounded by the other honoraries and listen to their stories. You're listening to what they've done, and it gets really emotional because you're thinking about all the people that got you here. It takes a lot of people to allow you to support you and be successful. You don't start successful. No one does. The band's current lineup consists of Spiteri, Johnny McElhone, bass, guitar, keyboards, Ali McErlane, guitar, Eddie Campbell, keyboards, Tony McGovern, guitar, backing vocals, and Cat Myers, drums. Next year, the band marks 40 years together, and Spiteri said she had no idea the group would ever become as famous as they are now. She said, "Honest to God, I thought if I could just write one hit record, I'd be happy." Johnny McElhone and I thought that as the two of us sat there in a spare room, literally recording on a 4-track, writing "I Don't Want a Lover," and we thought, we can write one song. He had already been in successful bands before. He'd already written a few hit records, so I feel that I probably had a better chance than a lot of people. Asked if the band has any plans to mark the 40th anniversary, Spiteri said, "Well, if I tell you, then you know about it, don't you? It's what you don't know about that you'll have to wait and see." We've got a big summer this year. We've got 30 festivals around the world. So we're doing that, and I'm actually heading off now to literally get back on the tour bus. Asked what advice she would offer any young aspiring musicians hoping to get into the industry, she joked, "Don't listen to people like me." Professor Sir John Curtis, who was awarded an honorary doctorate of letters, said, "It's a great delight to receive an honorary degree from the university. It is a rare accolade, and I appreciate the university for having awarded it to me. In a sense, it's a recognition or a celebration of the fact that I have been able to work with Glasgow University over a number of years. And the fact that, although I'm a member of a different, somewhat rival institution on the other side of the city, it's been perfectly willing to allow me to work or to be involved in some of the work of this institution as well." Sally Magnuson, who was awarded a Doctor of the University degree, added, "I'm absolutely thrilled to have got this wonderful doctorate from the University of Glasgow. It's been a real thrill for me to discover what the inside of this lovely university is like, and to be part of its history is tremendous. Centuries and centuries of history and beauty and learning. It's fantastic." Also honoured, Kirsty Young spent 35 years working as a broadcaster across a number of TV and radio outlets, including the BBC, STV, Channel 5 and ITV. She was made an honorary doctor for her services to her industry, and it means a huge amount to her. She told the PA News Agency, "The thing about this honorary degree is it genuinely feels like an honour." She added, "My mother is a Glaswegian, my grandparents and great-grandparents were Glaswegian, so to be in this great city and receive this award means a huge amount." That article was by Ryan McDougall of the PA News Agency.
That concludes this week's edition of the National Podcast. Please remember to subscribe to our channels at Tune Review and to tell your friends about our service.